Tonight on Greater Boston, emergency rooms across the state are at the breaking point as we head into the winter months. And no, it's not COVID behind the, quote, unprecedented crisis. 3 emergency room physicians join me. And later, Shannon Liss-Riordan. She's the lawyer behind a federal class action lawsuit against Twitter for laying off nearly half of its workforce last week with little to no warning. Emergency rooms in Massachusetts have been pushed to their limits and beyond several times over the course of the pandemic. And as we head into our 3rd winter with COVID reduced but still here, we're already seeing hospitals more overrun than ever. The Boston Globe reports on absurd wait times for a bed. 8 hours in one case, even more in others, and a jump in patients leaving without the care they need, citing a recent national study which found the rate of such cases nearly doubled from 1% to about 2% between 2017 and the end of 2021, putting patients at risk for even more severe illness. One hospital official who's worked in emergency medicine for nearly 30 years told the Globe these conditions are unprecedented in his career. That would be Dr. Michael VanRooyen. He's chief of enterprise emergency medicine at Mass General Brigham, where 6% of patients coming for emergency care left without being seen over the last 4 months. He's also the director of the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative at Harvard University and a professor of emergency medicine at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Laura Burke is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Harvard Medical School and an attending emergency physician at Beth Israel Deaconess. Dr. John Santiago is an emergency physician at Boston Medical Center, as well as, of course, a state representative from Boston. Doctor, thank you all 3 for being here. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Dr. Burke, can I start with you? I'm sure you read Kay Lazar's piece in the Boston Globe. You heard a little bit of what I said a minute ago. Are things any different at your place than they are at Mass General Brigham?
I think one of the aspects of this crisis is that it's fairly universal. It's not just in Boston. It's not at any particular hospital in Boston. It's not unique to Massachusetts. It's really something we're seeing nationwide when we talk to our colleagues. And this is something that people are surprised by, but that our leaders in the field have been warning about for years, even decades, in fact, that our healthcare economics do not incentivize being prepared for a crisis like this. And we, too, are experiencing crowding. We found ways to try and mitigate, but we are also experiencing the staffing shortages and crowding that are plaguing every ED in this emergency department in the state.
Dr. Burke, do you know the percentage of people who come to the emergency room who leave as per what I was just describing a minute ago without getting care?
I don't know the number for the last 4 months. It really varies from shift to shift. You know, on the busiest days, like today's Monday, Mondays are predictably busy and crowding is high. I'm sure it'll be higher than on the Sunday overnight shift. But what the specific percentage is that's equivalent, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Dr. Santiago, is this emergency room condition, crisis, whatever you want to call it, is it universal? Is it happening at your place too?
It's absolutely universal, Jim. Let me just say, I'm sure I speak for the 2 physicians on this call as well. I mean, really being an ER doctor is really one of the privileges of my life. And I say that emergency medicine is an effective lens into the community. When there's an economic crisis or a surge in violence, you know, we take care of that. And what we see right now with the ED crowding, ED boarding issue, I mean, that's reflecting our health system. And it's just frankly it's not working.
Can you describe what boarding is for lay people, please, Dr. Santiago?
So the article that you were referring to talks about the phenomenon left without being seen. Those are folks who are in the emergency department waiting room who leave prior to being evaluated by a physician. Boarding refers to when a decision is made that the patient needs to be admitted to the hospital. And as soon as that decision is made, the clock starts. So typically you want to get someone into bed within 4 hours. But what we've seen over the past couple of years, for a very long time now, that people will stay in the emergency department for hours upon hours, I mean, up to 24 hours, and particularly in the setting of this mental health substance use crisis that we're seeing. I know I speak for my colleagues here. I mean, it's unprecedented trying to have someone with active mental health issues in the hallway of a bed, in the hallway of a hospital.
Dr. VanRooyen, why is this happening? I mean, Dr. Burke said it's been a long time coming, so it shouldn't be a surprise. But what caused this to explode right now?
Actually, one of the main, well, first of all, thank you for having us on and kind of demystifying this issue because it's a little bit complicated. One of the major issues that we see are that hospitals are so full and the length of stay for admitted patients are 1 or 2 days more than they ever have been before, which means that they can't get patients out to post-acute beds, to rehab beds, et cetera, which means those patients back up in the emergency department into those boarding patients that really become extreme. At Mass General, we've had up to 99 boarded patients in the emergency department waiting to be admitted.
Is that in part, Dr. VanRooyen, because so many people we read about and spoke to and heard about avoided care during the pandemic for fear that they'd get COVID if they went to a medical facility? Is that backup part of the problem?
I think no. I think the real reason is that staffing shortages in, say, rehab beds or rehab facilities or nursing homes make it very difficult to get patients out of the hospital and to those facilities, which means that patients are waiting days to get out of the hospital, such that we are backing up in the emergency department.
You know, Dr. Burke, when I read a number in the story in the Globe, I thought it was a typo, and I had one of my coworkers check. The Mass Health and Hospital Association said there are 19,000 vacant positions in hospitals across the state, and we dug a little deeper, and that's roughly 17% across the board. Obviously a little higher in some positions, a little lower. To me, that is unimaginably horrible. Is that at the core of the problem at your place?
It varies. I work in Boston. I work at our community hospitals. Some geographic areas are able to recruit better, but that is also universal. We're all hurting for nurses and other staff members. There's just a shortage of the people we need to staff the inpatient beds, to staff the emergency departments. And if we don't have nurses in particular, we can't get patients to inpatient units, and we can't take care of people in the ED.
You know, Dr. Santiago, one of the things, whether the number is it's up to 2% nationally, 6%, I know it's higher on certain days at certain hospitals in Massachusetts, the patients who leave, starting with you, Dr. Santiago, but then I'll talk to all three of you. Do you have any idea what the consequences for that person who does leave are, what they do? Do they go to urgent care? Do they just go home? Do they die? Do they get worse? Starting with you, Dr. Santiago, do we know or no?
I mean, what we do know is that there are negative consequences associated with ED boarding. We know that morbidity, mortality rises. We know that burnout increases as well, and we know that it's more expensive. Now, with respect to left without being seen, people may often think that, oh, that person didn't need to wait. Their condition wasn't as serious, their symptoms weren't as bad, therefore they decided to leave. But what we see in the literature, that's not true. Folks are just as sick, so if they're having chest pain, they come to the emergency department, they very well could be having some significant heart attack that's going to require some acute intervention. If their right arm is feeling kind of numb, they might indeed be having a stroke, but they have to leave because they have to take care of a sibling or go to work, and that has some negative health consequences without question.
Dr. VanRooyen, have you been able to track it all? I know it's sort of odd to say, what happens to those who leave, because if you knew that much, they probably wouldn't have left. But do you have any idea about what happens to those, whatever the percentage is, that leave?
So I'll agree with Dr. Santiago. It's fairly well known that those patients suffer from the same rates of heart attacks, strokes, and severe illness than those that come into the emergency department. We have a callback system where we check on patients to make sure that they got care. But frankly, we don't know the complication rate. I think it's, one thing that we do, because we have such extreme crowding, we try to fit everybody in, because I'd rather see people, even in a suboptimal setting, than to have them sit in a waiting room when they're unknown.
Suboptimal meaning you may have to ask them questions where somebody else, another patient, is sitting just feet away, and there may be a privacy concern. It may be in an unorthodox physical setting. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, Dr. VanRooyen?
That's exactly right. We have people in hallway beds, in sitting areas, in every place in the emergency department. But again, as a provider, I'd far rather have that, even however challenging it is, than not know those patients that are coming in and leaving without being seen.
Dr. Burke, as a consumer of what the three of you do, rather than a provider like you, what is equally terrifying to me, the wait, the people who just leave without getting care, are the people who read the story or hear in their neighborhood that you got to wait for X number of hours till you either get seen or get a bed or whatever, who say, I'm not going to even go there to begin with. I'm just not going to get care. That's a serious issue that I guess is unquantifiable, but obviously there. No, Dr. Burke?
That is absolutely a concern, because it's not the job of the lay public to judge their own emergencies. If they feel like they need emergency care, they should come in. And we know this from the early pandemic when people did delay care. We saw that when people did come in with strokes, they were more severe. We know that there was excess mortality that was not explained by COVID alone. And we think that this care avoidance was a key driver of this. We still want people to come in, and we will do our best to get them seen and get them the care they need. It's heartbreaking to have to deal with crowding and have to work in these suboptimal conditions, because we all want better for our patients.
Can we talk for a minute about possible fixes? Dr. Santiago, or in this case, Representative Santiago, I know in the economic development bill that finally made it out of the legislature, it's not your fault, but whatever it is, that finally made it to Governor Baker's desk that he hasn't signed yet, but I assume he will. $350 million, I think, is the number out of the $3.8 billion that's in there for fiscally strained hospitals. I don't even know what a fiscally strained hospital is. But will that allay some of this problem, or is it targeted to other kinds of things?
It's really just a drop in the bucket, Jim. I mean, as the doctors were saying, my colleagues on this call, I mean, this issue has been going on for quite some time, and I'm glad that article in the Globe come out and that you're highlighting this issue, but it really needs to be addressed robustly and aggressively. As Dr. Burke said, there really is a misalignment of healthcare incentives that's really driving this, in conjunction with the insufficient healthcare capacity, whether it's the labor shortage, whether it's the increase in mental health substance use. There are a whole host of things that need to happen right now. The $350 million, that's a drop. It's an important one, no less, particularly in the setting that we're of COVID and coming out of COVID. But also, we need to do so much more. We just passed a significant omnibus mental health bill to really hopefully address some of those labor shortages as well.
So, Dr. VanRooyen, is there, other than outside help like dollars, is there something within institutions that, I assume you're doing everything you can, but what can be done to try to address this within a hospital or a hospital network?
Sure. So the first step is that having the hospital and the hospital network overall understand that this is not an emergency department problem. This is actually our emergency departments, as busy as they are, without boarding, could take care of our patients.
Understood.
We're designed for it. We serve our patients and we serve our communities. So this is a hospital and a system-wide issue. So the first is the recognition. Secondly is actually distribution of patients around the system. So what we call load leveling between the academic and the community sites. Then having novel solutions like building home hospital resources or telemedicine resources, so we can actually find ways to move patients out of the emergency department into alternative settings.
So based on what you said, Dr. VanRooyen, if we were to speak in 6 months, is your estimation that the problem would be less severe or no?
Oh, no. I think that, one of the challenges that the hospitals are so full, and the labor shortages on the other side of it are so severe still, that I don't anticipate this getting better. And so we need to come up with every available solution to mitigate this issue. And there are, dozens of different solutions that we need to take on. But the first is the recognition by hospitals and by the overall health system that this is not an ED problem, it's a hospital problem.
Are you saying that because there's not that recognition?
Yes, I think that actually it's difficult for people who are not or outside of the walls of the emergency department to really understand that the boarding issue and the crowding issue is really an institutional issue. And I have colleagues that are working very hard in the institutions to solve these problems too. So it's not like they don't necessarily recognize it, but it is a huge issue, and we need everybody to understand it and to help.
I saw both of you nodding your heads in agreement with what Dr. VanRooyen said. Last question for you, Dr. Burke. So someone's watching tonight and hears what you're saying and says 3 days from now when they have a health crisis or problem, I'm not sure I'm going to go do this. I don't want to sit there forever and not get care. What do you say to that person in advance?
I think one option would be to talk to your physician to help triage where you should go for your care. Certainly, if you think you're having a medical emergency, I still advise going to the emergency department. We will find a way. Certainly the wait is longer, but if you think you're having an emergency, do not delay care. If you're not sure and you wanted to talk to your physician, there are other ways that in places that care could be handled, but I would not try and go it alone and try and judge for yourself. I would talk to a qualified healthcare professional to get the care that you need and to help walk you through the options that exist.
Dr. Burke, Dr. Santiago, Dr. VanRooyen, thanks for your time tonight, and much more importantly, thanks for what you do during the days and nights at work. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Elon Musk has made a lot of questionable moves since taking over Twitter, from his bid to monetize account verification and his new rules, which include suspensions and bans for name changes, seemingly in response to a tidal wave of users parodying him. But one move in particular is prompting not just outrage, but legal action. Mass firings. On Friday, the company laid off around 3,700 employees, nearly half of its workforce. The process was a hasty one, with many employees assuming they were being fired when they were cut off from emails, Slack, or other workplace systems several hours before they got an actual termination email from Twitter to their personal accounts. And now Twitter is facing a class action lawsuit for not giving such employees statutorily mandated advance notice based on a federal law known as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification, or WARN Act. I'm joined now by the attorneys leading this class action on behalf of a handful of ex-Twitter employees, Shannon Liss-Riordan, who also brought a similar suit against Musk's electric vehicle company Tesla after layoffs back in June. And you'll remember she ran for the Democratic nomination for Attorney General. Shannon Liss-Riordan, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
What happened to these people that caused them to get to you? What did they get from Twitter?
So this was all done very hastily Thursday night. Rumors had been swirling that about half of the workforce would be laid off, and then it started Thursday night with people being shut out of their accounts without any notice. We took immediate action because we were concerned that Musk was going to pull the same trick he did with Tesla, and that was lay off staff without any notice and then ask them to immediately sign away their rights through a severance agreement. At the time, Musk...
give you what you're statutorily entitled to that I screwed you out of, but only if you sign an agreement.
Well, the story has been evolving, because then when the notices actually came out Friday, he claimed that he was giving the WARN Act notice because people would be paid until January 4th. We're not sure yet the extent of who got that notice. Our lead plaintiff in the case has still not gotten such a notice, and he hasn't been promised anything. But what looks like is happening now is Musk is trying to count this 2 months towards the severance pay that the employees were promised they would get if there were layoffs after Musk took over the company. So our big concern is that employees this week most likely are going to be asked to sign away their rights without realizing perhaps that they have a legal claim.
Which they do not need to do to get what they're entitled to under federal law. By the way, the thing that Musk said, he tweeted out, let me just read it to you at home there. Regarding Twitter's reduction in force, unfortunately, there is no choice when the company is losing over $4 million a day. Everyone exited was offered 3 months of severance. That's a January 4th thing, which is 50%. Wait a second, that's only 2 months, actually, which is 50% more than legally required. What's he talking about?
Yeah, that's actually not right. So the employees were promised that if there were layoffs after Musk taking over the company, that they would be entitled to the same benefits, including severance pay, that would have previously been given to them as Twitter employees. So Musk is now trying to have it both ways. He's trying to count the 2 months WARN payments toward that severance, and that's not allowed. So we're in the process of amending our complaint right now to put in these new allegations that he's using this to try to get out of these promised severance payments.
And my understanding, I don't know if any of your, by the way, is one of your clients one of the people who tweeted, "Look, Mom, suing Twitter"? Was that one of yours?
He's the lead plaintiff.
He tweeted that. I love that. We've read a lot of horror stories. A woman 6 months pregnant, another woman 8 months pregnant, and again, getting all their accounts shut off before they're even notified in their personal accounts. Just so we're clear, this act requires, if they're mass layoffs, and they define that by a certain criterion, and this satisfies it, they do have to give this 60 days severance deal, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And just to be clear, from what I understand, the issue is not just inadequate notification. There are issues about whether any of this was retaliatory or discriminatory. Is that stuff that you're looking into as well?
Yes, we actually just filed a charge with the National Labor Relations Board on behalf of the lead plaintiff because just a few days ago, he had advised his coworkers how to protect themselves if there was a mass layoff. He showed them how they could download their documents to protect themselves in the event of this happening, and he got cut off that day.
And by the way, we should say some of these workers are in Boston, by the way.
Yes.
I think your clients are in California from what it is.
One of the lead plaintiffs is in Boston.
Oh, is in Boston
Yes.
as well. And they contend, I don't know if you know this, but they contend, I'm sure you've heard of it, I don't know if you know if this is true, they contend that in the content moderation department, which is of most concern to people, not only long-term, but leading up to tomorrow's election. He says the layoffs are only at 15% rather than the 50% level. You're smiling, meaning that could be total BS.
Yeah, we have no way of knowing. And it's very concerning this all happened just days before the midterm elections, when Twitter is a major source of news for so many people across the country. You know, in the old days, millionaires would buy newspapers in order to influence politics and get their voices heard above all others. And in today's day and age, a billionaire buys a social media company in order to get his views out there. And apparently he's tweeting now encouraging people to vote for Republican candidates.
I should say, in defense of some other billionaires who have bought print companies like John Henry here in town with the Globe and Jeff Bezos, even Jeff Bezos, I've spoken, I mentioned this the other night, to an editor and a former editor of both newspapers. Both have said there's been no interference. So really it depends on the level, I mean, who the person is. Speaking of who the person is, well, it's easy to hate Elon Musk. Jack Dorsey, who was the guy that founded this place, was CEO, I think, twice. He basically apologized, saying that he upstaffed, I don't even know if that's a word. He hired too many people too fast, and he created the problem. Why are you laughing?
I don't know. I'd just be interested in seeing some of the communications between him and Elon Musk and how much he got paid in the deal.
He supported Musk taking over, we should say.
To take that.
You know, and you filed a similar suit, I think, earlier this year against Tesla for doing comparable things?
Yes, yeah. And in that case, Musk responded. He actually responded to the case and said that it was, quote, trivial.
I saw that.
And I said, I think it's very concerning when the richest man in the world thinks that protecting employee rights and federal labor laws is trivial. And the federal court didn't think so. The federal court agreed with us that the employees were entitled to notice before they had to sign away their rights.
You know, one of the things that's really troubling to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, is I looked at the penalty for violations of the WARN Act. There's almost an incentive for wealthy employer to violate and hope that the employees don't know what their rights are. It seems to me that, correct me again if I'm wrong, two penalties are: one, you got to pay them the amount of money that they were entitled to that you didn't give to them, and there's a $500 a day fine maximum. That's it. I mean, so why not take a shot, if you're an unscrupulous employer, to getting away with not complying with the federal law mandates?
Well, you just explained the problem that we face as employee advocates for pretty much all employment protections. Employers can often just justify financially skirting the law, waiting to see if anyone comes after them, and then perhaps paying a fraction of that through a settlement. And here it's particularly bad.
A cost of doing business kind of thing, almost.
Yes, exactly. And here it's especially bad because these companies use arbitration agreements to try to block class actions, thinking that no one's actually going to file a case individually. And that's what we do, is we'll file lots of arbitrations, thousands if we have to.
It seems to me the other concern, I mean, I never did what you did, but I was a union president in my former life. The trickle down or up impact of this extends beyond the people, the 3,700 in this case, or the workers at Tesla you represented, who were mistreated, to the people who are still there, who basically are on tenterhooks all the time about, is what happened to my coworker going to happen to me? And that's intentional on the part of some Musk-like characters, isn't it?
Well, he's got everyone living in fear, right? That they better be working 24-hour days and sleeping at work and, doing everything that, because they're all living on the edge that they're going to be in the next round of layoffs.
Is there, my understanding is that all this happened Thursday and Friday, and then last night, or today, is today Monday? Yes, it is. He said, I need some of them back. You're laughing again. This sounds like it's preposterous. Is that what's happening? And
yeah. And you just mentioned to me the satire where
Andy Borowitz did a headline today. He says Musk, the great satirist, said Musk accidentally includes himself in the latest round of mass layoffs. So is that happening? Are they inviting some people back?
That is what I've heard. Again, this was done so fast and without any regard to thinking about how this was affecting the employees. And we are also going to be looking at the information on who was selected. Older workers often bear the brunt of mass layoffs, and if he's going to try to get a release from people this week, under federal law, they have to release the ages of people who were laid off and not laid off, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that data.
I think practically everybody I know is rooting for you and your clients. Shannon liss-riordan, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks so much. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. Just before the polls close, we'll take a look at what's in store if Republicans take the House and maybe the Senate. Plus, an Election Day palate cleanser, Jamie Mamano, the chef and owner of Ostra, which just got a 5-star review from the Boston Globe. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.
Hey folks, Edgar B. Herwick III here from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. And today, we take a trip to the spa. Life here in Massachusetts is chock full of little quirks. You can see an IMAX movie at a furniture store. Our bowling balls are half as big and don't have any finger holes. And yes, convenience stores are sometimes called spas. That is something that has long puzzled one loyal fan of the Curiosity Desk.
I was wondering if you know why convenience stores or corner stores in Boston are called spas.
Now that word spa comes to us from, of all places, Belgium. Specifically, a small town in Belgium named Spa. And they named it Spa because it was built around this natural bubbling mineral spring thought to have healing powers. The word spa derives from the word espa, which means spring or fountain in Walloon, a Romance language spoken in parts of Belgium. Resorts built around mineral springs like the one in Spa began popping up all over Europe and the US in the 19th century, and they became known as spas. So from there you can see why we use the word today for anything from a swanky resort to a health and wellness place, even a backyard whirlpool. But a convenience store? The use of the word spa in this sense is unique to this area, and it goes back at least as far as the late 1800s. We know this because there are people like Julie Roberts in the world. She studies regional dialects, including the one that we speak around here, which is known in linguistic circles as Eastern New England English.
It's wicked nice out. I'm gonna go to the spa to get a Boston tonic.
See, that's classic Eastern New England English right there. Roberts tracked down one of the earliest known usages of the word spa in this context in print. It was in a story about Boston from a Pennsylvania newspaper.
In Boston, Thompson's Spa, the greatest soda resort at the hub, easily clears for its owners $50,000 a year.
What made Thompson's Place a spa was the bubbling soda fountain. And of course, for decades, soda fountains were a staple at drugstores and five and dimes, themselves the forerunners to the modern convenience store. There you have it, a little quirk of Eastern New England English that upon closer examination actually makes a whole lot of sense. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps most importantly, let me know what you are curious about, because hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there. Sweet, there's one on my shirt. You might want to take it off.
Next time on Antiques